Beneath the sands of Egypt lies an engineering secret that rewrites the rules of the ancient world. We are talking about the 100-ton granite boxes of the Serapeum, artifacts whose flawless construction should not exist in their time. By the end of this, you will see history not as a simple timeline, but as a story filled with astonishing gaps in our knowledge. How did Bronze Age artisans carve stone with machine shop precision? And what sacred purpose demanded such impossible perfection? What forgotten truth about human potential is still waiting in that silent, subterranean dark? In the year 1850, a young French archaeologist named Auguste Mariette made a discovery that would pull the veil from one of Egypt's most profound mysteries. Walking through the desert near Saqqara, he noticed the head of a stone sphinx, almost completely buried in the sand. Following a hunch, he had his team begin to dig, and they uncovered not just one, but a long, forgotten avenue of these guardian statues. The trail led him to a hidden entrance in the bedrock, a doorway sealed for thousands of years. When he cleared the rubble and descended, he stepped into a realm of shadow and silence, a vast underground corridor lined with colossal stone chambers. This was the Serapeum, a name that echoes the Greco-Roman period, but its heart was purely ancient Egyptian. It was not a tomb for pharaohs or queens, but a sacred necropolis built for a very specific and revered occupant, the Apis bull. In the Egyptian worldview, the Apis was no ordinary animal. It was considered a living incarnation of the creator god Ptah, a divine being in flesh and blood whose life and passing were events of national importance. When such a bull died after a long and ceremonial life, its loss was a profound moment. The entire nation would enter a period of mourning, and the immense task of preparing its eternal resting place began. This context is everything. It transforms those silent granite boxes from mere stone containers into something far greater, sacred vessels designed to house a fragment of the divine for all eternity. The sheer ambition of it is staggering. This was not a single chamber carved on the surface. An entire network of tunnels and side rooms was hewn from the living limestone bedrock, hundreds of feet underground, to create a permanent, hidden sanctuary. This speaks to a civilization operating at the absolute peak of its spiritual conviction and its organizational power. What kind of reverence, what depth of belief could drive a society to undertake such a monumental, hidden task generation after generation for more than 1,000 years? The boxes waiting in those chambers are the answer, carved in impossible stone. The true magnitude of this endeavor begins not in the dark tunnels of Saqqara, but under the blazing sun of Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. Here, along the banks of the Nile, lie the ancient quarries of rose granite, the sole source for the stone that would become those perfect boxes. This is our first enigma, a puzzle of pure scale and logistics that defies easy explanation. Granite is not just any rock. On the scale used to measure hardness, it sits near the very top, a material so dense and stubborn that striking it with a simple copper chisel would barely leave a scratch. To even consider it for such precise work speaks to an ambition that borders on the irrational. Yet they did not just consider it, they mastered it, starting with the extraction of raw blocks, each weighing as much as a modern locomotive. Visualize a single 100-ton slab of this unyielding stone being pried from the living earth, a process that itself would have been a monumental undertaking of engineering and manpower. Then the real challenge began. How do you move a mountain? The accepted theory is a symphony of pre-industrial ingenuity, wooden sledges gliding on lubricated tracks, teams of hundreds or even thousands of laborers pulling in unison, and a fleet of barges constructed just for this purpose to navigate the Nile. This was not a one-time event, but a supply chain operation repeated over centuries, a continuous flow of impossible weight traveling an immense distance. Think of the coordination, the food and water required for the workforce, the repairs to equipment, the navigation of seasonal floods. This logistical triumph, all before a single precise cut was made, reveals a society with an administrative and operational genius we are only beginning to appreciate. It sets a breathtaking stage, proving that for these builders, no earthly obstacle was too great when serving a divine purpose. But this staggering journey from quarry to crypt was merely the prelude, the delivery of a blank canvas. The greater mystery, the one that truly chills the spine, awaited in the silent dark, where that raw, mountainous stone was about to be transformed. The true shock, however, waits for you inside the gallery itself, standing in the presence of the boxes. Your first impression is not of ancient artistry, but of chilling, industrial uniformity. Each sarcophagus is a near-perfect rectangular solid, a geometric form of such severe simplicity that any flaw would scream out. And yet, across these colossal faces, there are no flaws to find. The outer surfaces of these 100-ton monoliths have been ground to an astonishing, almost impossible flatness. Modern engineers who have studied them report that the deviation across a surface several meters long is often less than the thickness of a credit card. To put that in perspective, this is a level of precision we associate with the granite surface plates used to calibrate machines in a modern workshop, a tolerance measured in thousandths of an inch. We are not talking about a generally smooth finish here. We are talking about a plane so true that if you placed a precision straight edge against it, light would not pass through the gap. This presents our second, and perhaps more profound, enigma. How do you achieve this on such a scale, with such a hard material, using only the tools archaeology credits to the era? A simple copper chisel and a stone hammer could never produce this result. The very geometry of the boxes whispers of a different process entirely. This kind of dimensional control implies the use of advanced measuring and guiding systems that have left no trace in the historical record. Think of long, true straight edges made of some durable material, perhaps wood or even stone itself, used to check the work over distances of 10 or 15 feet. It suggests the use of precise angular templates to ensure every corner is a perfect 90 degrees, and a systematic grinding or polishing technique that could remove material in minute-controlled increments. The exteriors alone tell a story not of brute force, but of a forgotten science of stone, a methodology that married immense power with microscopic precision. This was not sculpting, it was engineering, and it forces us to ask a haunting question. What knowledge, what set of techniques and tools allowed a civilization we think of as ancient to operate with the quality assurance of a modern machine shop, and why has all evidence of that system vanished from our view? But the exterior perfection is merely the prologue to a deeper, more intimate mystery. Step closer and peer into the open cavity of one of these granite giants. Here, the true mastery reveals itself, not in the broad plains you can see, but in the hollowed space you cannot. Each of these 100-ton monoliths was not simply carved into a box shape. Its heart was meticulously removed, scooped out to create a perfect interior chamber with walls of astonishing uniformity. This act of subtraction, of creating empty space within solid granite, presents a third enigma that challenges our understanding of ancient craftsmanship. Think of trying to carve a perfect square hole into a block of concrete using only a hammer and a dull chisel. Every strike risks cracking the material, shattering the very edges you are trying to define. This is the fundamental problem with hollowing granite using percussive tools. The shock of the blow travels through the stone, creating microfractures and leaving a rough, irregular surface. It is a method of brute force, not of finesse. Yet, the interior corners of these boxes are not rounded or shattered. They are crisp, sharply defined right angles, meeting with a geometric clarity that should be impossible. The walls themselves, far from being rough-hewn, exhibit a smooth, almost polished consistency. This smoothness is the critical clue. It points away from pounding and chiseling and toward a process of grinding, of abrasion. The most compelling theory suggests a technique of almost unimaginable patience. Artisans may have used a slurry of water and a hard abrasive sand, perhaps emery or quartz, pumped through a guided tube or worked with a large, flat stone. This would act like a primitive milling machine, wearing away the granite molecule by molecule, granting the worker godlike control over the final form. It is a silent process, one of relentless, slow friction rather than violent impact. This explains the flawless surfaces and the pristine corners, but it raises a staggering implication. Such a method would require not just time, but a sophisticated understanding of material science, fluid dynamics, and precision guidance. Where are the tools, the apparatus for this advanced stone-eating technology? Their absence from the archaeological record is as profound as the boxes themselves. Did this knowledge simply fade away, or was it purposefully guarded? A sacred craft that lived and died with the masters who practiced it in that subterranean dark, all to create a perfect resting place for the divine. Even after the box itself was perfected, the work was not done. A final, breathtaking act of precision remained, one that transformed these open vessels into sealed sanctuaries. Each colossal granite box was originally crowned with its own lid, a single slab of matching stone weighing anywhere from 15 to 30 tons. This lid was not merely placed on top, it was mated to the base with an intimacy that defies belief. In several documented cases, the fit is so flawless that the seam between lid and base is virtually invisible, a joint so tight that not even the thin blade of a razor can be slipped into the gap. This is our fourth enigma, the puzzle of the seamless seal. To understand why this is so extraordinary, we must break down what this single fact demands. First, it requires that the entire top surface of the 100-ton box be ground to an absolute, dead flat plane. Second, the entire bottom surface of the 15-ton lid must be ground to an identical, mirror-perfect flatness. Any deviation, any slight bow or hollow in either surface would create a gap. Achieving this on two separate, enormous pieces of granite is a feat of surface finishing that would challenge modern workshops. But the true genius lies in the third demand, the act of assembly. How do you lower a 30-ton block of granite with the delicacy of a watchmaker onto another block without shattering the precisely ground edges you have spent months perfecting? A single misalignment, a slight tilt as the lid descends, would result in a catastrophic crunch, a collision of unimaginable force that would chip and scar the stone, ruining the perfect seal forever. This operation required immense foresight. The engineers would have needed a controlled lowering system, perhaps using sandbags or a counterweight mechanism, that allowed for minute adjustments in real time, ensuring the lid descended perfectly parallel to the base until the final moment of contact. It speaks to a culture that did not just value the box, but valued the closure itself, viewing the perfect, airtight seal as the ultimate act of reverence. This was not just about keeping something in, it was about creating a permanent, inviolable boundary between the sacred contents and the outside world, a final statement in stone that whispered of eternity. This pristine geometry leads us to a fifth and deeply unsettling enigma, one you can only see when you look closely enough. On the walls of the most perfect boxes, something is missing. Across the vast, flat surfaces and within the sharp interior corners, you will search in vain for the telltale scars of ancient labor. There are no parallel chisel grooves, no clusters of punch marks, no evidence of the percussive violence we see on so many other Egyptian monuments. The stone instead shows a flowing, almost liquid quality in certain spots, a gentle undulation that some observers describe as looking scooped or even melted. This visual signature does not match what we would expect from pounding it with stone hammers or dragging a copper saw. It is a silent anomaly that has fueled generations of speculation. Could the builders have possessed a lost method for temporarily softening granite, perhaps using a plant-based chemical compound that made the stone pliable like clay before it re-hardened into its final glassy state? Or perhaps they harnessed sound using precisely tuned vibrations to resonate the crystalline structure of the granite, allowing it to be shaped with a gentler touch. These ideas lie on the fringe of history, captivating because they offer an elegant, if unproven, solution to the physical puzzle before our eyes. Mainstream archaeology, of course, provides a more grounded explanation. The prevailing theory points to the incredible patience of abrasion. Teams of workers would have used copper saws not to cut, but to guide a slurry of quartz sand and water back and forth across the granite surface. With each pass, the harder quartz particles embedded in the copper would slowly, relentlessly grind the granite away. For hollowing the interiors, they might have used tubular copper drills with the same abrasive slurry, or simply swung heavy pounders made of even harder diorite stone to pulverize the granite in a controlled manner before grinding it smooth. The process is logical and demonstrable on a small scale. Yet, when scaled up to the creation of a 100-ton box with machine shop tolerances, the theory begins to strain. The time required becomes almost mythical, and the consistent perfection achieved across dozens of boxes feels less like a testament to patience and more like evidence of a standardized, highly efficient technology. The absence of tool marks, then, is not just an empty space. It is a positive clue, a fingerprint left by a process so refined that it left no trace of its struggle. It forces us to confront a haunting possibility. Perhaps we are not looking for missing tools made of bronze or iron, but for an entire missing methodology, a school of applied knowledge that viewed stone not as something to be conquered by force, but as a material to be respectfully persuaded into perfect form. But to truly understand the depth of this mystery, we must place these boxes on the timeline we think we know. According to the official historical record, the grand galleries of the Serapeum, the ones holding these perfect granite sarcophagi, were constructed and used starting from the reign of the great pharaoh Ramesses II, around 1300 years before the Common Era, and continued in use for over 1,000 years, well into the era of Greek and Roman influence. This places their creation in what we call Egypt's New Kingdom, a period of immense power, wealth, and architectural achievement. We see the towering temples of Karnak and the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings from this same general era. So surely, the logic goes, this civilization was capable of such work. Yet, when you stand before one of these boxes, a quiet but persistent question forms. Does this level of stoneworking truly match what we see elsewhere in that golden age? The statues and pillars of Ramesses II are monumental, yes, but they show the marks of their making, the striations of tools, the artistic style of the period. The boxes of the Serapeum feel different. They are devoid of artistic flourish, reduced to pure, sterile geometry. Their perfection is not artistic, it is industrial, a standard of precision that seems to belong to another category of achievement entirely. This creates a subtle but powerful gap in the story. Some of the boxes do bear inscriptions, names of later pharaohs like Kamweset, a son of Ramesses known for restoring ancient monuments. The conventional interpretation is straightforward. These rulers found the sacred boxes and simply claimed them, adding their names to already existing, revered objects. Think of it like a mayor putting a new plaque on a centuries-old city hall. The building itself is far older than the dedication. If this is true, then the construction date of the boxes could be pushed back even further into a mistier, less documented past. So we are left with a puzzle woven into the stone itself. Is the Serapeum the pinnacle of what we already understand about New Kingdom engineering, a secret project that pushed their known tools and methods to an absolute limit we have simply underestimated? Or does it represent something else entirely, a legacy technology, a surviving fragment of a much older, perhaps even more advanced understanding of stone, inherited and maintained by later generations because its purpose was too sacred to alter? The timeline we have offers a frame, but the craftsmanship within it whispers of a different story, one where the true age of these silent giants remains the most carefully guarded secret of all. The flawless granite before us was not carved for human eyes. To grasp the immense effort behind it, we must look past the stone and see the sacred occupant it was built to honor. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the profound spiritual purpose that overrode every practical difficulty, the cult of the Apis bull. In ancient Egypt, divinity could walk the earth in living form, and the Apis was its most revered embodiment. This was no ordinary farm animal. A single bull chosen from the entire nation had to bear very specific, miraculous markings: a white triangle on its forehead, the pattern of a vulture on its back, and other signs that identified it as the living incarnation of the creator god Ptah. From the moment of its selection, its life was one of unparalleled ceremony, housed in its own temple, served by dedicated priests, and consulted as an oracle whose movements were interpreted as messages from the gods. The entire nation saw in this creature a direct link to the forces that sustained the universe. So when, after a life of perhaps 20 or 25 years, the Apis bull passed on, it was not merely an animal's death. It was a cosmic event, a moment of profound spiritual transition that plunged Egypt into a period of national mourning. The entire ritual that followed was designed to be as monumental as the belief itself. The bull's body underwent an elaborate 70-day mummification process, transforming it into an eternal vessel. But a permanent vessel required a permanent home, a sanctuary worthy of protecting this divine essence for all of time. This is the crucial key that unlocks the mystery of the granite boxes. The obsessive, impossible precision we see was not driven by engineering pride or a king's vanity. It was a direct, non-negotiable requirement of faith. The theology demanded it. Think of it this way: if you are building a house for a god, a being of perfect, eternal nature, could that house be anything less than perfect and eternal? A rough wall, an uneven corner, a poorly fitted lid, these were not just aesthetic flaws. In their worldview, such imperfections could represent a spiritual vulnerability, a weakness in the sacred barrier between the divine and the mortal world. The granite, chosen for its hardness and durability, had to be made flawless to fulfill its role as an eternal, impervious shield. Suddenly, the allocation of staggering resources makes a different kind of sense. Why would a society move mountains of stone across hundreds of miles? Why would generations of artisans dedicate their lives to achieving microscopic tolerances in a dark underground gallery? For a practical project like a quarry or a canal, good enough might have sufficed, but for this, nothing less than perfection was acceptable. The spiritual driver transformed an engineering challenge into a sacred duty, justifying efforts that would seem irrational for any other purpose. It tells us that when a culture's deepest beliefs are on the line, the definition of what is possible can be radically rewritten. The silent, perfect geometry of the box, then, is not just a testament to lost technology, but to the immense, focused power of a shared conviction, a belief so potent it could shape granite itself into a form worthy of eternity. Yet this quest for perfection in granite was not an isolated phenomenon in the ancient world. To fully grasp what makes the Serapeum so extraordinary, we must briefly step outside of Egypt and place it alongside other legendary sites of stone. Consider the breathtaking walls of Machu Picchu, high in the Andes. The Inca builders there achieved something miraculous, fitting massive, irregularly shaped blocks together so tightly that not a single blade of grass can grow between them. This is a masterclass in jigsaw puzzle precision, a testament to an intimate understanding of stone's natural form and how to marry one unique shape to another. It is brilliant, but it is a different kind of genius. The Serapeum boxes are not irregular puzzles. They are standardized geometric solids machined from the inside out. Or look closer to home at the Osirian at Abydos, often attributed to the pharaoh Seti I. Its colossal sandstone blocks are precisely cut and fitted, yet they bear the tool marks of their era. They show us the height of conventional Egyptian stonecraft, magnificent but familiar. Even the mighty foundation stones of the Giza Plateau, while unimaginably large and perfectly leveled, do not showcase this same combination of features. What sets the Serapeum apart is the fusion of three nearly impossible challenges, all solved in one object. First, the immense scale, with single blocks weighing 100 tons. Second, the unforgiving material, granite, the hardest stone commonly used. And third, that eerie interior machining, the hollowing and perfect surfacing of a space never meant to be seen again. Other sites may match one or even two of these traits, but it is this specific trilogy that makes the Serapeum arguably unique. This comparison is not meant to suggest a secret global civilization or a single shared builder. Instead, it reveals a more profound truth about our ancient past. It shows us a world where different cultures, in isolation, developed their own pockets of highly specialized knowledge, pushing the limits of their environment and beliefs to create the impossible. The Inca mastered the art of the fit, the pyramid builders mastered the art of alignment and mass, and within Egypt, a specific, focused tradition of precision stoneworking seems to have reached its absolute zenith in the silent, subterranean galleries of the Serapeum. It stands as a monument not to a global plan, but to the incredible heights human ingenuity can reach when it is channeled by a singular, unwavering purpose. Perhaps the most compelling testimony comes not from historians, but from those who work with stone and metal for a living. When master machinists and modern engineers walk into the Serapeum's gallery, their reaction is often one of profound professional disbelief. They are trained to see process, to reverse engineer in their minds the steps required to create the object before them. And with these boxes, the mental calculation simply does not add up. Their consensus presents a sobering reality check. To replicate just one of these 100-ton granite boxes with the same flawless specifications today, they explain, would be a monumental undertaking. It would likely require computer-guided diamond-tipped saws to cut the initial block, and massive computer numerical control milling machines, the kind used for aerospace components, to hollow out the interior with that kind of dimensional control. The sharp, 90-degree internal corners are a particular point of astonishment. In modern machining, such a feature in a hard material like granite demands a specialized tool called an end mill, a rotating cutter that can plunge into the material and clean out the corner without leaving a radius. The presence of these pristine corners in the Serapeum suggests to a machinist's eye the use of a guided tool that could move linearly and apply even pressure, not the erratic pounding of a hand-held stone. This professional skepticism is crucial. It moves the discussion beyond speculation and into the realm of applied physics and material science. These experts are not speaking of lost lasers or alien technology. They are pointing out a severe and glaring disconnect between the toolkit archaeology traditionally assigns to the era and the physical evidence permanently recorded in the granite. A copper chisel and a stone hammer are wonderful tools for many tasks, but they cannot produce a surface flat to within thousandths of an inch over a 15-foot span. They cannot create a perfectly uniform hollow with machined corners. The testimony of modern craftsmen forces us, the audience, to re-examine the ancient toolbox with fresh, technically informed eyes. It asks us to consider not what we believe they had, but what the stone itself proves they could do. The gap between these two things is where the true mystery resides, a silent question etched in rose granite that challenges the very narrative of technological progress. Theories on paper are one thing, but the true test of history lies in the hands of those who try to rebuild it. In recent decades, a fascinating movement has emerged, one of experimental archaeology, where dedicated researchers and skilled craftsmen have rolled up their sleeves to attempt the impossible. Their mission, to recreate even a small section of a Serapeum box using only the tools and materials we officially credit to the ancient Egyptians. They begin with the accepted toolkit: copper saws without teeth, heavy dolerite pounding stones, and an abundance of quartz sand mixed with water to act as an abrasive. The process is brutally simple in concept. A team pulls the copper saw back and forth, the sand trapped beneath it slowly grinding into the granite. With the pounders, they strike the stone repeatedly to break its crystalline structure before grinding the debris away. And yes, these methods work. They can, given enough time and effort, shape a block of granite. A small groove can be cut, a corner can be roughed out. This is where the conventional theory finds its proof of concept, and it is a powerful point. But then the researchers set a higher goal, to achieve not just shape, but the Serapeum's specific standard of precision. They aim for that dead flat surface, that razor-sharp internal corner, that seamless fit. And here, the experiment hits a wall of sheer, daunting reality. The process becomes exponentially more difficult. Maintaining absolute flatness over a long surface with a hand-pulled saw is a Herculean task of consistency. Every slight variation in pressure, every change in the abrasive slurry, introduces tiny imperfections. To correct them requires even more grinding, more days, more weeks of unrelenting labor. The time required balloons from months into years for a single, small-scale component. The results, while impressive as a demonstration of basic technique, consistently fall short of the ancient benchmark. They are good, often very good, but they lack that chilling, machined perfection. These practical trials do not disprove the mainstream view, but they cast it in a startling new light. They translate abstract descriptions of labor into tangible, backbreaking reality. They force us to confront the economic and human scale of such a project. Could even the wealthiest pharaoh, with all the resources of the state, sustain such a painstaking, generation-spanning effort for what was essentially a hidden, sacred interior? The experiments suggest that while the known methods were theoretically capable, the cost in time and sustained effort pushes against the limits of feasibility. This practical struggle does not close the mystery, but rather widens it, inviting us to wonder if the true secret of the Serapeum was not just immense patience, but a more sophisticated application of the very principles these modern experimenters are using, a lost efficiency that turned a lifetime's labor into a master's masterpiece. The silent perfection of the granite forces us to consider a radical possibility: that the builders of the Serapeum possessed a branch of practical knowledge that simply did not survive. This is the realm of the lost technology hypothesis, a space where speculation attempts to bridge the vast gap between the artifact and the accepted narrative. Could the ancient Egyptians have used tools far more sophisticated than simple chisels and pounders? One compelling idea involves large, mechanically guided saws. Imagine a massive copper blade, perhaps set in a wooden frame like a two-person lumber saw, but on a monumental scale. This frame would keep the blade perfectly straight and true as teams of workers pulled it back and forth, feeding a constant slurry of abrasive sand and water. Such a guided system would explain the long, flat surfaces, turning an erratic hand motion into a controlled, repeatable machining process. Power could have come from human teams, or perhaps even from a redirected water source, using a simple water wheel to create a continuous, rhythmic cutting motion. This is not science fiction, it is mechanical ingenuity, a logical step up from the hand saw that simply standardizes and amplifies its action. Another theory delves into the natural world, suggesting the use of chemical agents derived from local plants. Certain acidic compounds found in nature could have been applied to the granite's surface, not to melt it, but to slightly etch or weaken the crystalline bonds on a microscopic level, making the stone more amenable to grinding for a short period. This would have been a form of ancient material science, a carefully guarded recipe passed from master to apprentice. The most discussed tool in this speculative toolbox is the tubular drill. We have evidence of small tubular drills being used in Egypt, typically made of copper. The theory suggests scaling this up dramatically. A large copper tube fixed to a guiding spindle would be rotated, perhaps by a bow drill mechanism or a team turning a capstan. Inside the tube and under its cutting edge, a slurry of an ultra-hard abrasive like crushed corundum or even diamond dust would be fed. This spinning, grinding tube could core out a perfect cylinder of stone or, by sweeping it across a surface, create a perfectly flat plane. Such a device elegantly explains the sharp internal corners and the uniform hollows, acting as a primitive but effective milling machine. While direct archaeological evidence for these specific tools is scant, their proposed existence is not about magic or aliens. It is about proposing a lineage of practical engineering, a school of thought focused on precision that, for reasons we may never know, was not passed down. Perhaps this knowledge was so specialized, so tied to the sacred task of building for the Apis, that it died with the last generation of masters who understood it, leaving behind only their impossible work as a monument to what was once known. The smooth, almost liquid surfaces of the granite invite a theory that seems to belong more to science fiction than to history. What if the builders of the Serapeum did not just work on the stone, but worked with it, using something as intangible as sound itself? This is the frontier where archaeology meets experimental physics, a space where researchers ask if resonant frequencies could have been a forgotten tool. The idea is captivating because it offers an elegant, almost magical solution to the physical puzzle. If you could find the precise vibrational note that granite naturally sings, could you guide its crystalline structure to fracture along perfect lines, or even make it more pliable for shaping? Modern technology gives this concept a surprising foothold in reality. Today, ultrasonic tools use high-frequency sound waves to cut through materials like glass and titanium with incredible precision, leaving behind smooth, polished edges. The principle is one of sympathetic vibration, where a specific frequency matches the material's natural resonance, allowing energy to be transferred with minimal force and maximum control. While no hieroglyphic text or archaeological find directly proves the ancient Egyptians possessed such sonic technology, the theory persists because it attempts to explain the unexplainable, the surfaces that look less carved and more persuaded. It represents a different way of thinking about the past, one that considers not just the tools we have found, but the potential applications of a science we are still rediscovering. This line of inquiry moves beyond searching for a lost chisel and asks us to listen for a lost frequency, a harmonic secret that might still echo in the perfect geometry of those silent, waiting boxes. The stone itself was a sacred statement. When the ancient Egyptians selected rose granite for the Apis sarcophagi, they were not merely choosing the hardest rock they could find. They were selecting a material steeped in cosmological meaning, a substance that embodied the very principles of eternity they sought to invoke. Granite, formed deep within the earth under immense heat and pressure over eons, represented permanence in its purest form. Unlike limestone, which could be eroded by wind and water, granite stood defiant against time. In a civilization whose entire spiritual framework was built upon the promise of eternal life and the stability of divine order, this physical resilience was a perfect mirror for their deepest hopes. The stone's unchanging nature was not a practical benefit, it was a metaphysical necessity. A tomb built for a god in flesh could not be made from anything transient. The granite box was more than a container. It was a promise carved in mineral, a guarantee that the sacred transition within would be protected for all of time. This symbolic choice was amplified by the granite's specific origin. It was not quarried locally from the cliffs near Saqqara. Every single block made an epic journey from the distant quarries of Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. This was not a logistical oversight, it was a deliberate act of sacred geography. Aswan was a place of profound mythological significance, associated with the source of the life-giving Nile, and crucially with the concept of the primordial mound. In Egyptian creation myths, the first land emerged from the cosmic waters at such a mound, the place where life and order began. By bringing stone from this mythic location, the builders were physically connecting the Apis bull's final resting place to the very moment of creation. Furthermore, the beautiful rose hue of the granite was often linked to the radiant glow of the sun at dawn, tying the bull, an incarnation of Ptah, into the daily solar cycle of death and rebirth. So the stone was a triple layer of symbolism. It was eternal in substance, sacred in origin, and radiant in appearance. When we view the staggering effort through this lens, the technical hardships transform. The back-breaking labor, the years of meticulous polishing, the perilous river journey with a 100-ton cargo, all of it shifts from a monumental engineering challenge into an act of profound devotional architecture. The difficulty was not an obstacle to be minimized, it was part of the ritual's very power. The immense effort expended by the state, by the priests, by the countless unnamed workers, was a form of sacrifice and reverence in itself. It demonstrated the absolute commitment of the living to honor the divine. Choosing a softer, easier stone like limestone would have been a practical solution, but it would have been a spiritual failure. The metaphysical properties of the granite were not just desirable, they were integral to the tomb's function. The perfect seal, the flawless surfaces, the impervious walls, these were not aesthetic choices. They were ritual requirements, creating a sealed, perfect microcosm where the chaotic decay of the outside world could not enter. This understanding finally answers the haunting question of why. Why go to such impossible lengths for a box that would be hidden underground, never to be seen again? Because in their view, the efficacy of the entire ceremony, the successful transition of the Apis into the eternal realm, depended on the perfection and permanence of the vessel they built. The stone had to be eternal because what it held was meant to last forever. The cult of the Apis did not last forever. As Egypt's ancient religious order gradually faded under the shifting tides of Roman rule and the rise of new beliefs, the sacred rituals in the Serapeum came to an end. The last known Apis burial their dates from the time of the Emperor Hadrian. Then the great stone doors were sealed, and the long, dark corridors were left to silence and dust. But this silence was not permanent. Sometime in the centuries that followed, the hidden sanctuary was found again, not by priests but by looters. The massive granite lids, each weighing many tons, were no match for determined thieves who had time and leverage on their side. They broke into the boxes one by one, searching for the treasures buried with the divine bulls. The mummies, the precious amulets, the ceremonial jewelry, all of it was stripped away, leaving behind only the hollow, empty chambers. The knowledge of the site's location faded from common memory, becoming little more than a whisper in the sand, until a Frenchman's curiosity pulled it back into the light. Auguste Mariette's excavation in 1850 was a moment of pure archaeological drama. After clearing the entrance and descending into the stifling dark with flickering torches, he and his workers found themselves in a scene of both grandeur and violation. The colossal boxes stood in their niches, majestic and immovable, yet every one had been breached, their sacred contents vanished into the shadows of history. The initial awe of discovery was quickly tempered by this evidence of ancient theft. In his effort to understand and document the find, Mariette made a decisive, and by modern standards, controversial move. He ordered the removal of one of the massive 30-ton lids from its box. The operation itself was a feat of 19th-century engineering, requiring wooden scaffolding, ropes, and sheer manpower. That lid, now displayed in the Louvre Museum in Paris, serves as a silent ambassador for the site, its sheer scale breathtaking visitors who have never set foot in Saqqara. Its removal, however, revealed the ultimate confirmation of the looting, a perfectly carved interior space, hauntingly empty. For the archaeologists of the 19th and early 20th centuries who followed Mariette, the Serapeum presented a tantalizing puzzle, but their focus was primarily historical. They meticulously copied the hieroglyphic inscriptions left by later pharaohs on the boxes, using them to piece together a chronology of the Apis cult. They catalogued the few remaining small artifacts and sought to align the burials with the reigns of known kings. In this necessary work, the boxes themselves were often seen merely as containers, their physical construction noted as impressive, but not investigated as a primary mystery. The staggering technical achievement was, for a long time, overshadowed by the pursuit of names, dates, and royal connections. This history of modern interaction traces a fascinating evolution in our own understanding. The Serapeum was first rediscovered as a looted treasury, then studied as an inscribed historical text. Only much later, as our own technological age advanced, did we begin to look past the writings on the stone to the stone itself, to see not just a tomb but a manufacturing enigma. Our appreciation has slowly evolved from treasure hunting to historical cataloging, and finally to confronting a deep, silent technological puzzle that asks more questions than the inscriptions ever answered. What we once saw as a backdrop for history has now become the central character in its own profound story. So where does this leave the official story, the one told by the textbooks and the majority of modern archaeologists who have dedicated their lives to studying ancient Egypt? Their perspective is one of grounded awe, a careful balancing act between acknowledging the staggering achievement and explaining it within the established framework of history. The mainstream academic view does not dismiss the boxes as mundane, far from it. It recognizes them as pinnacles of human craftsmanship, but it places them firmly within the known capabilities of the Egyptian state, amplified to an extreme degree. This view points to three colossal resources the civilization possessed in abundance: time, manpower, and a unifying religious purpose. With a virtually unlimited labor force drawn from the population during the Nile's annual flood, when farming was impossible, the state could marshal work crews numbering in the thousands for decades-long projects. The timeline itself is a key piece of evidence. The Serapeum was in active use for well over 1,000 years. This was not a single pharaoh's vanity project completed in a lifetime. It was a continuous, sacred tradition. Within that immense span, generations of artisans could refine their techniques, passing down hard-won knowledge from master to apprentice in a direct, unbroken chain. The argument here is one of cumulative ingenuity, human skill honed to a razor's edge by centuries of focused practice. Archaeologists also point to evidence within the complex itself that speaks of a learning process. Not every box in the Serapeum is a masterpiece of precision. In some of the older side tunnels, researchers have found sarcophagi of lesser quality, with rougher surfaces and less perfect geometry. These are seen as early attempts, trial runs where the methods were still being perfected. The existence of these less refined boxes is powerful evidence for the mainstream view. It shows a progression, a technology evolving toward that final, breathtaking standard we see in the main gallery. This perspective urges a cautious patience. It argues that leaping to theories of lost high technology or outside influence, what scholars term hyper-diffusionism, is unnecessary when the sheer force of human dedication, organized on a civilizational scale, provides a plausible, if mind-boggling, explanation. The call is for continued, meticulous archaeology. The belief is that the missing pieces of the puzzle, perhaps the specialized workshop areas where these boxes were finished, or a cache of the advanced abrasion tools used in their final polishing, may still lie buried in the sands around Saqqara, waiting to be found. It is a stance that trusts in the slow, steady work of discovery, suggesting that the greatest mystery of the Serapeum may not be a forgotten science, but a monumental testament to what human hands and minds can achieve when united by a belief that transcends generations. This flawless geometry speaks a silent language of numbers and angles. To translate the vision of a perfect granite box into a physical reality, the master architects of the Serapeum first had to solve the problem on paper, or more likely in the sand. The precision we see is not accidental. It is the direct result of a sophisticated and deeply ingrained command of practical mathematics. Long before the first chisel touched stone in Aswan, the entire project existed as a theoretical framework, a set of geometric principles that would guide every subsequent action. The foundational tool was the royal cubit, a standardized unit of measurement roughly equivalent to 20.6 inches. This was not a vague approximation, but a precise, reproducible length, often carved into official rods of granite or hard stone to ensure consistency from quarry to workshop to final installation. Every dimension of the box, its length, its width, its depth, would have been defined as a whole number or a simple fraction of these royal cubits. This mathematical standardization is what allowed teams working 500 miles apart on different components of the same project to create parts that would fit together with that breathtaking finality. But measurement alone does not create perfection. The true secret lies in the application of right angles and parallel lines. To achieve those razor-sharp 90-degree corners and dead-flat surfaces, the builders relied on simple but profoundly effective tools, the set square and the A-frame level. A wooden set square, carefully crafted with a perfect right angle, would be placed against the stone again and again as work progressed, a constant check against error. The A-frame level, a simple device with a plumb line suspended from its apex, could verify both vertical surfaces and level horizontal planes. These tools transformed abstract geometric ideals into physical truth on a monumental scale. The process likely began with a full-scale diagram. Imagine a master scribe using a length of cord, dipped in red ochre pigment, to snap perfectly straight guidelines onto a smooth section of desert floor or a vast plaster wall. This diagram would be the project's true blueprint, showing the exact footprint and elevation of the box. Some researchers even suggest the use of small-scale models, carved from softer stone like limestone, which could be studied, measured, and used to communicate the complex final form to the master craftsman. This mathematical underpinning was the invisible scaffold upon which the entire physical effort was built. It provided a common language that could coordinate the labor of thousands, from the quarry foreman who oversaw the cutting of the initial block to the precise dimensions, to the teams in the underground gallery who performed the final polishing. Without this shared theoretical framework, the project would have descended into chaos, resulting in a collection of misshapen stones that could never achieve that seamless fit. In this light, the granite boxes are far more than tombs or even engineering marvels. They are three-dimensional theorems carved in stone, silent proofs of the ancient Egyptians' advanced and applied mathematics. They demonstrate a culture that could not only conceive of perfection in the abstract, but could deploy the tools of geometry to impose that perfection upon the most stubborn material on Earth, all to fulfill a vision that began as nothing more than lines drawn in the sand. Behind every perfect angle and polished surface stood a person, a master whose name history has chosen not to record. The true architects of the Serapeum were not the pharaohs whose inscriptions grace the stone, but the anonymous artisans who transformed geometric ideals into physical reality. These were not common laborers, but the elite of the ancient working world, likely members of a state-sponsored guild, a protected class of craftsmen whose skills were considered a national treasure. To understand the boxes, we must finally meet the hands that made them. While we have no specific records of the Serapeum's builders, the best window we have into their world is a place called Deir el-Medina, a specially constructed village across the Nile from modern-day Luxor. This was not a town for farmers or merchants, but a purpose-built community for the artisans who carved and decorated the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Here, these skilled workers and their families lived in relative comfort, receiving wages in the form of food, tools, and supplies directly from the state treasury. This model gives us a powerful clue. If such a privileged, closed community existed for tomb builders, it is almost certain that a similar, perhaps even more secretive guild was established for the far rarer and more sacred task of creating the Apis sarcophagi. Their knowledge was a guarded asset, a form of power. It was not written down in manuals but passed from master to apprentice through years of hands-on training, a living library of technique held in memory and muscle. A master sculptor would teach his student not just how to strike the stone, but how to listen to it, to feel the difference in resistance that signaled a hidden flaw in the granite, to understand the precise sound a saw made when the abrasive slurry was just right. This was an oral and tactile tradition, a cascade of subtle secrets that died with the last practitioner. The social organization behind a single box was a symphony of specialized labor, each movement perfectly timed. It began with the quarrymen in Aswan, experts in reading the bedrock to find a flawless vein and knowing exactly where to drill the weakening holes to release a 100-ton block without shattering it. Then came the transporters, masters of leverage and hydraulics who understood how to coax a mountain of stone onto a sledge and guide it to the river. After the long journey north, the block would be received by the master sculptors in the workshops near Saqqara. These were the architects of form who would rough out the basic shape with an expert eye, establishing the primary planes and corners. They would then hand it over to the finishers, the true virtuosos of precision. These individuals, working in the dim underground gallery with oil lamps and reflective pools of water to check for flatness, performed the final act of transformation. With painstaking abrasion, they turned rough surfaces into planes of glassy perfection, achieving tolerances that still baffle us. Overseeing it all were the scribes and foremen, the project managers of the ancient world, who allocated materials, tracked progress, and ensured every component from lid to base adhered to the sacred geometric specifications. This was not a chaotic work site, but a meticulously choreographed operation that could span decades for a single box. While we rightly marvel at the silent stone, we should also stand in awe of this human system, the generations of accumulated, hands-on genius it represents. These unknown masters were the keepers of a profound dialogue between mind and material, a conversation spoken in the language of mathematics and manifested in flawless granite. Their legacy is not a signature but a standard, a whisper from the past that tells us when human skill is united by a sacred purpose and honed by generations, it can achieve what later ages might mistake for magic. The silent perfection of the granite was matched by the profound wisdom of its location. The builders of the Serapeum did not simply choose a random patch of desert. They selected the Saqqara Plateau with a master's eye for geology and climate, turning the very earth into an ally for their sacred task. The foundation of everything was the bedrock itself, a massive layer of stable, dry limestone. This was not loose sand or crumbly shale. It was a solid, predictable medium, perfect for the ambitious engineering of underground tunnels and chambers. By carving directly into this living stone, they created a structural matrix that would support the immense weight above for millennia without risk of collapse, a natural vault far more reliable than any built structure. Then there was the desert itself, an environment we often see as harsh and unforgiving. For the Serapeum, it was the ultimate preservative. The hyper-arid climate, with its minimal rainfall and low humidity, acted as a perfect natural desiccant. For thousands of years, it prevented the water damage, freeze-thaw cycles, and biological growth that would have rapidly deteriorated a similar structure in a wetter climate. The stone stayed dry, the surfaces remained pristine, and the silent galleries were spared the slow decay that moisture brings. But the environmental insight went even deeper into the very act of working underground. By carving the boxes in situ within the finished chamber, the master craftsman harnessed a constant, cool temperature. This was crucial when working with granite, a material that expands and contracts with heat. Working in the sun-baked desert above would have caused the stone to heat unevenly, creating microscopic stresses that could lead to cracks during precision work. The subterranean workshop provided a stable, thermally neutral environment, allowing for that meticulous, molecule-by-molecule grinding without the interference of the outside world's temperature swings. Furthermore, the confined space of the gallery itself became a practical asset. The walls and ceiling of the surrounding limestone could be used to anchor massive wooden frameworks for scaffolding and lifting. Imagine a sturdy timber structure built right around the emerging granite block, braced against the solid rock walls on all sides. This created an incredibly stable platform from which workers could operate, safely lowering heavy grinding stones or guiding long saws with controlled, even pressure. The very confines that might seem restrictive to us were, for them, a built-in support system. This demonstrates a level of environmental integration that is breathtaking. The ancient masters did not fight their location, they collaborated with it. They read the landscape not as an obstacle, but as a toolkit, understanding that the stable bedrock, the dry air, and the sheltered underground space were not just conveniences, but essential components of their methodology. Their genius lay as much in their choice of workshop as in their work within it, proving that sometimes the greatest tools are not held in the hand, but are patiently waiting in the world around us. Yet those hollow chambers hold a profound and unexpected truth. In their emptiness, they have preserved something invaluable, a pristine record of the final moment the artisan's hand left the stone. Unlike the great pyramids or the temples at Karnak, which have faced millennia of wind, sand, and human contact, the interiors of these granite boxes were sealed in a dark, dry, and perfectly stable environment from the day they were completed. The surfaces we see today are exactly as the last master finisher left them, untouched by erosion or later restoration. This makes each box a perfect time capsule, not of treasure but of technique. Every flat plane, every sharp corner, every subtle undulation in the granite is a frozen snapshot of an ancient standard of quality, preserved with a clarity that no above-ground monument can match. They are, in effect, the world's most durable and precise technical manuals, written not in ink but in the language of finished stone. This pristine state opens a remarkable window for modern research. By studying the minute variations between the boxes, researchers could potentially decode the very process of their creation. Imagine comparing two boxes side by side with advanced scanning technology. Slight differences in the pattern of tool marks, even microscopic ones invisible to the naked eye, could tell a story. One box might show a slightly different method for achieving the internal corners, suggesting an experimental phase or a different team at work. Another might exhibit a more refined polishing technique on its lid's mating surface, hinting at an improvement developed over time. The subtle signatures left by different abrasive grits or the unique wear patterns on guiding tools could even reveal distinct schools of craftsmanship, perhaps workshops from different regions or guilds with their own guarded secrets. In their silent, geometric perfection, these empty vessels hold a coded ledger of their own manufacture. They await the day when new analytical technologies, like high-resolution three-dimensional surface mapping or artificial intelligence-driven pattern recognition, can scan every square inch and compare the data across the entire gallery. Such a study would not look for inscriptions, but for the fingerprint of the process itself, reading the stone's memory to reconstruct the lost workflow step by step. The greatest story the Serapeum has to tell may not be written in hieroglyphs on its walls, but etched at a microscopic level on the flawless skin of its granite, a story of hands, tools, and a forgotten standard of perfection, waiting silently in the dark for us to learn how to read it. The journey into this mystery now requires a moment of clear sight, a necessary step to separate the signal from the noise. As we stand before these impossible boxes, it is tempting to reach for explanations that feel as grand as the stones themselves, stories of lost continents, visitors from the stars, or global cataclysms that reset human history. These are captivating narratives, but they share a common flaw. They often bypass the human beings at the heart of the story. Let us address these ideas directly, not to dismiss wonder, but to refine it. The flawless granite of the Serapeum is not evidence of alien technology. There are no hieroglyphs of spacecraft, no artifacts of unknown alloys buried with the boxes. The precision, while staggering, follows a human logic of geometry and purpose, not an extraterrestrial one. Similarly, the idea that the stone was somehow melted or cast like concrete, while it might explain the smooth surfaces, finds no support in material science. Granite crystallizes under immense heat and pressure deep within the earth. It cannot be liquefied and poured without industrial furnaces reaching temperatures far beyond any evidence from ancient Egypt. The stone was carved, shaped, and ground, a physical process that left a physical record, however subtle. And while the timeline is debated, there is no geological or archaeological evidence to suggest these boxes are relics of a pre-flood super-civilization like Atlantis. They are firmly, undeniably products of the Egyptian landscape and its long, documented history. So why do these fringe theories persist with such strength? They emerge from a very real and understandable place, the profound gap between what we see and what we thought was possible. When faced with an artifact that seems to defy the standard timeline of human achievement, the mind seeks a narrative that bridges that gap. If our current understanding says they could not have done this, then perhaps someone else or something else must have. This is where our critical thinking becomes essential. The real revelation of the Serapeum is not that we need to invent a more advanced outside force to explain it. The revelation is that we have likely underestimated the depth of ingenuity, organization, and specialized skill possessed by an ancient civilization operating at the absolute peak of its cultural and spiritual power. The precision we marvel at does not demand a supernatural explanation. It demands a re-evaluation of human capability. This brings us to a crucial clarification about the very title of our exploration. When we speak of precision tools that cannot be matched, we are not suggesting the ancient Egyptians had literal modern lathes or milling machines hidden away. We are speaking of the anachronistic level of precision they achieved, a standard of workmanship that feels like it belongs to a different era of technology. It is the result that is unmatched, a benchmark that forces us to question the completeness of the toolkit we have attributed to them. By setting aside the more sensational explanations, we do not diminish the mystery, we elevate it. We transform the conversation from fringe speculation into a legitimate and far more compelling historical and engineering puzzle. We are left with a human-centered enigma, one that asks us to look more deeply at the forgotten corners of our own past, to consider the quiet genius that can flourish when an entire civilization aligns its will toward a single, sacred, impossible goal. What we are searching for in the dust may not be a lost crystal power source, but a lost chapter in the story of human hands and minds. The stone has kept its secrets for millennia, but the future whispers of new ways to listen. Our hope for finally unraveling this ancient enigma may not lie in bigger excavations, but in quieter, more precise technologies that can see what human eyes cannot. The next chapter of the Serapeum story will be written not with shovels but with scanners, using non-invasive methods that treat these perfect boxes as the ultimate forensic scene. Imagine ground-penetrating radar pulsing silently through the bedrock around the known galleries. This technology could map the subterranean landscape in 3 dimensions, revealing the ghostly outlines of hidden chambers, undiscovered side passages, or perhaps even the long-lost workshops where the final polishing was done. Finding such a space, untouched and filled with the debris of creation, would be a discovery of unimaginable value, a frozen moment of the craft itself. Simultaneously, high-resolution 3-dimensional laser scanning could capture every square millimeter of the granite surfaces, inside and out, with accuracy down to the width of a human hair. This digital twin would allow researchers to study the boxes in impossible detail from anywhere in the world. They could run algorithms across the vast datasets, searching for patterns invisible to the naked eye. Does the microscopic texture on the interior of Box A match that of Box B, suggesting the same team or tool was used? Are there consistent, repeating marks in the stone that trace the unique path of a specific type of saw or grinding apparatus? This data could become a library of tool signatures, a Rosetta Stone for decoding the lost language of their technique. Furthermore, advanced spectrographic analysis could be employed, using focused light to examine the molecular surface of the granite. This might detect the faintest chemical residues, the ghost of a cutting compound. Were they using a slurry of simple quartz sand, or did they possess a more effective abrasive like crushed emery or corundum? Finding a trace element not native to the local area would be a bombshell clue, pointing to a sophisticated, organized supply chain for specialized materials. Each of these approaches respects the integrity of the site while peeling back layers of time. They allow us to investigate not by taking the boxes apart, but by listening ever more closely to the story they have been telling all along, waiting for the right tools to hear it. The truth may not be a single dramatic revelation, but a slow, steady accumulation of microscopic evidence, a trail of invisible breadcrumbs left in the stone that could finally lead us to the hands of the masters. This silent perfection in granite forces us to reconsider a story we tell ourselves about human history. We often envision technological progress as a straight, ever-ascending line, a steady march from simple tools to complex machines. The Serapeum, however, presents a different shape entirely, one not of a line but of a mountain range. It shows us that human achievement can reach astonishing, isolated peaks, where a culture focuses its entire genius on a singular, sacred goal, masters it completely, and then, for reasons lost to time, that specific summit is abandoned. The knowledge does not necessarily flow forward into the next era. It simply recedes into the past, leaving behind a silent monument that future generations struggle to explain. This is the profound philosophical implication of these boxes. They demonstrate that progress is not always cumulative. It can be episodic, concentrated, and tragically fragile. A civilization without electricity, without steel, without any of the power sources we consider essential, could look at a 100-ton block of the hardest stone and see not an obstacle, but a medium to be perfected. They solved problems of mass, precision, and logistics on a scale that still commands respect, and they did it with a methodology that has left almost no trace. This suggests they possessed a deep, applied wisdom, a kind of elegant simplicity in their approach that we, with all our complex machinery, have yet to fully replicate or even understand. It is a humbling thought. It asks us to look at the ancient world not as a primitive prelude to our own sophistication, but as a collection of different sophistications, each tailored to its time and purpose. What other elegantly simple solutions to complex problems have been forgotten, lying not in stone, but in the lost patterns of thought that shaped them? The Serapeum stands as a permanent question mark against our arrogance, a reminder that our current technological zenith is just one peak in a vast and mysterious range, and that other, equally impressive summits may still be hidden in the mists of time, waiting to reshape our entire view of the journey. The air changes the moment you begin the descent. A tangible shift washes over you, leaving the dry, blazing heat of the Egyptian desert behind as you step into a world of cool, damp stillness. This is your first sensory introduction to the Serapeum, a sudden drop in temperature that feels like crossing a threshold into another time. The modern stairway leads you down into the bedrock, the sounds of the world above fading into a profound and absolute silence. Your eyes adjust to the artificial glow of electric bulbs strung along the ceiling, their weak light casting long, dancing shadows that only deepen the sense of immense space. And then you see them. The colossal granite boxes are not displayed in a bright museum hall. They are in their original subterranean home, resting in niches carved from the living limestone walls. The scale is what strikes you first, a physical punch to the gut that no photograph can ever prepare you for. You find yourself tilting your head back to follow the lines of a sarcophagus that towers over you, a geometric monolith of such severe, simple mass that it seems to warp the space around it. You are not just looking at history, you are standing in its presence, feeling the weight of centuries pressed down from the stone. The silence here is not empty, it is thick, almost audible, broken only by the distant echo of a dropped coin or a whispered exclamation from another visitor. You reach out almost without thinking and place a hand against the granite. The stone is cool and surprisingly smooth under your fingertips, a direct tactile connection to the hands that polished it to this impossible finish thousands of years ago. This is where the mystery transforms from an intellectual exercise into a full-body experience. Your rational mind might recite the textbook explanations, but your senses are reporting something else entirely, a visceral understanding that what you are witnessing defies the comfortable story. The sheer physicality of the boxes, their silent, immovable perfection in this echoing dark, triggers a deep, wordless awe. It is a feeling closer to what one might experience in a vast cathedral or before a natural wonder, a humbling encounter with something that feels profoundly beyond ordinary human endeavor. This emotional data, this first-hand awe, is the unsung fuel of the entire mystery. It is why engineers visit and leave puzzled, why theorists dream up lost sciences, and why so many people simply cannot accept a simplistic answer. The site does not offer a dry puzzle to be solved with dates and diagrams. It delivers a sublime and slightly unnerving gift, a direct channel to the sublime ambition of a distant past. You leave the cool dark and climb back into the blinding sun, but the impression remains, a quiet echo in your mind that asks, long after the visit is over, how, and more importantly, why. The silent granite of the Serapeum has not stayed confined to academic journals. Its profound mystery has leaked into our collective imagination, finding a second life in the vibrant worlds of art, literature, and modern media. Long after the last Apis bull was laid to rest, these perfect boxes began to appear in the pages of adventure novels and the frames of documentary films, often serving as the ultimate proof of a forgotten chapter in human history. In these stories, the Serapeum is rarely just an archaeological site. It is a keystone, the undeniable evidence that forces the protagonist to question everything they thought they knew about the past. This cultural footprint is incredibly telling. It demonstrates that the enigma of the boxes taps into something fundamental within us, a deep and abiding curiosity about our own origins and the possibility of lost wisdom. When a novelist needs a setting of awe-inspiring, inexplicable antiquity, they often turn to its shadowed galleries. When a filmmaker wants to visualize an ancient technology that defies explanation, they show the impossible geometry of those sarcophagi. While some of these portrayals lean toward the sensational, weaving tales of advanced prehistoric cultures or extraterrestrial architects, they serve a crucial purpose. They keep the conversation alive outside of university halls. They transform a niche historical puzzle into a public fascination, ensuring these silent stone vessels continue to provoke wonder. This popular engagement, for all its occasional embellishments, acts as a powerful engine. It inspires artists, sparks the curiosity of young students, and funds independent researchers who might one day look at the old evidence in a brand new way. The Serapeum's journey from a looted tomb to a cultural icon proves that some mysteries are too potent to be buried by sand or time. They demand to be grappled with, to be woven into our stories, because they challenge the very narrative we tell ourselves about where we come from and what we are capable of achieving. So we are left standing before the stone, holding a tangle of threads. One thread is the deep crimson of spiritual imperative, the unwavering belief that demanded nothing less than eternal perfection for a divine vessel. Another is the coarse, sturdy rope of logistical miracle, the story of moving mountains across a river and a desert. A third is the fine, almost invisible filament of technical anomaly, the geometry and surfaces that whisper of a forgotten standard. And the final thread is the woven tapestry of historical context, the names and dates that attempt to anchor this wonder to a timeline we recognize. Pull on any single one and the story unravels. But weave them together and a stronger, more humbling picture begins to emerge. The honest truth is that no single theory we possess today, from the strictly orthodox to the wildly speculative, answers every question these boxes pose. The mainstream view of endless manpower and abrasive sand explains the how in principle, but strains under the weight of the sheer consistency and quality of the final product. The idea of lost high technology elegantly explains the precision, but lacks the corroborating evidence we would expect to find elsewhere. Perhaps the most plausible scenario is not a single silver bullet, but a perfect storm of factors unique to that time and place. Imagine the extreme, culture-defining motivation provided by the Apis cult, a purpose that justified any cost. Combine that with generations of artisans honing a specialized craft in near secrecy, their cumulative skill refined to a razor's edge. Add to this the possibility of a simple but highly efficient mundane technique, something we have overlooked precisely because it was so effective it left minimal trace, like a specific method for guiding large stone saws or formulating an ultra-hard abrasive slurry. And finally, place all of this under the immense, organized will of the most powerful centralized state of its age, capable of marshalling resources and labor on a scale we can scarcely comprehend. This confluence transforms the impossible into the merely monumental. The 100-ton granite boxes of the Serapeum, in the end, may be the ultimate monument to focus. They represent what becomes possible when an entire civilization aligns its creative spirit, its administrative genius, and its physical labor toward a single, sacred goal. It is a lesson in the power of unified cultural purpose, a demonstration that the boundaries of an era are not fixed, but can be pushed, reshaped, and even transcended when a society truly believes in the work of its hands. The mystery endures not because the answer is magical, but because the human achievement in its full context remains so profoundly, magnificently human. The boxes are a question we cannot yet fully answer, but their very existence is the most important reply. They stand not as a closed case in the history books, but as an open invitation, a permanent challenge etched in rose granite. They ask us to reconsider the quiet genius of our ancestors, to see the ancient world not as a simpler time, but as a different kind of sophisticated, one where belief could move literal mountains and patience could grind stone into a form worthy of eternity. Whether the final secret lies in an undiscovered workshop, a forgotten method of abrasion, or a depth of skill we have simply underestimated, the pursuit itself transforms how we see history. It becomes less about memorizing dates and more about listening to the silent language of stone, a language that speaks of ambition, devotion, and a standard of craftsmanship that still whispers across the millennia. As we step back from the cool dark of the gallery and into the modern light, we carry with us more than an unsolved puzzle. We carry a renewed sense of wonder, a humbling reminder that the past is not a static exhibit behind glass, but a living conversation with the present. The 100-ton boxes of the Serapeum do not need to give up all their secrets to grant us a gift. Their enduring mystery is the gift, a testament to the boundless and often surprising capabilities of the human spirit when driven by a purpose greater than itself. If this journey into the heart of ancient Egypt's deepest enigma has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own theories or reflections, and subscribe to join us as we continue to explore the greatest wonders and unanswered questions our shared history has to offer.